Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Black Muslim Girl Flies Friday feature. Today is Friday, March 29th. And alhamdulillah, I'm joined by Aïdah Rasheed. Welcome. We had a little bit of technical difficulty on IG Live, but that's okay. The one monkey don't stop no show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And again, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm
Nope.
glad we have this platform to
Yes.
speak on and to share, and I
Yeah.
look forward to our conversation.
I'm so excited because, first of all, the reason why BMG Fly got started was my experience at a film festival and not having
Mm,
the opportunity to see films that include us in
mhm,
anywhere in the landscape. And then when I approached this topic to filmmakers, poignantly Mr. Spike Lee himself, I was met with so much
mm,
opposition that I felt like, you know what, we just have
mm,
to do our own thing. And you, of
mm,
all people, know exactly what it's like to navigate the film industry as a Black and Muslim woman. And that's definitely what I
mm.
want us to talk about. Alhamdulillah for having you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be chatting with you. And yeah, I feel like you know a lot more than I do. So I'm also going to be listening and learning too.
Oh, come on now. Right now, you are in production of a short film, a documentary. I definitely want to talk about that. But before we get started, tell us and the rest of the world who you are and where you grew up and what you're doing right now.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Aïdah Aliyah Rasheed, and I was born in Berkeley, California, and I grew up between the San Francisco Bay Area and Sacramento, California. I spent my early years, my parents actually, my father received a scholarship to study Arabic in Sudan. And so when I was actually 2 years old, we moved to Sudan in Khartoum. And my father and my mother were studying at the University of Khartoum in Sudan, and that's where I spent my early years. Although we're not Sudanese, we're African American, but there's a strong heart connection that we have to Sudan and the Sudanese people, and we're praying for the Sudanese people right now that are going through the horrific conflict happening there. Um, but I grew up there and then moved back to California, Northern California, where I went to my primary years uh, in California, studying in public schools and, always just really a curious child, wanting to know more about how things worked and was just very observant. There was a television, there was always TVs in my parents' house and my grandparents' house. So I grew up I remember when the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air started. I remember watching we weren't allowed to, but at nighttime my cousins would watch Tales from the Crypt. I don't know if you remember that
Yes.
show. And In Living Color
Right.
and all of these shows that were in the 90s, it was just seeing, and the Cosby Show, of course, and seeing, you know, um just watching this, I would see lots of content growing up, different types of content growing up. And so I was just always around people from the entertainment industry because my uncle was MC Hammer's hairstylist in Oakland, California. Yeah. So I remember once our family, I think there was a concert happening and all of our family members gathered in our home to prepare to go to this concert. Of course, I was too little, so I didn't go to the concert, but I just remember these moments in my childhood where I was seeing the power of community, the power of family, and also media, and how all these things connected in some really special and unique way, especially coming from a really unique Black family and then my family was the Muslim family. So, so then there was this extra layer to
Yeah.
um just navigating, being into interfaith family situation where we're always trying to like come together. And so that was through watching shows or entertainment things, things around entertainment, but also family gatherings, family reunions where there was food, movies, television, so I was just putting all these puzzle pieces together because I was always trying to figure out like how do you know, what is this thing called being human? And then how do we gather to appreciate like what's happening around us and understand it all too? Like I didn't quite understand all of the things that I was seeing but I was just exposed to all these things growing up. So
Oh, I totally get that.
yeah,
So, coming from
yeah.
an interfaith family myself, yeah, my mother's side of the family was Catholic, and you know,
hmm
so
hmm
I totally get that. And navigating
Yeah.
your place in life and in your family itself, first and foremost,
Right.
and then
Right.
your community and
hmm
and then your masjid community, because
hmm
there's like these different layers when you're a Black and Muslim in America, because you have
Yeah.
your family community, and then you have your neighborhood community, and then you have your masjid community. So yeah,
Right.
when
Right.
did that identity of being a Black Muslim girl like
Mm.
solidify itself for you? When did you
Mm.
step into that?
I mean, I would say different points. I remember again listening to music. I remember listening to Lauryn Hill's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill when that album came out and Jill Scott. And I would hear these things. I was like, oh, wait, they're talking about things like using vocabulary, using terminology that I've heard and that was like affirming me as being Black, Muslim. We didn't use the term Black actually growing up because my father's teacher, the late Imam Murthy Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him and forgive him of any wrongdoings and grant him into the highest station of paradise. Imam Muhammad didn't use that term Black. Like, we use the term Bilalian.
Right. I remember that.
um, so, I didn't hear that term or even refer to myself that way, even though, I mean, I knew that's what I was. And if people use that term, I would just say yes. But I think middle school, and then when I went away to university, I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah,
We
my
both have that heart connection. Yeah, that's like my second home too. Being there was really when I began to ask these bigger questions about identity. I worked on a big project with Morgan State University, the Maryland Institute College of Art, and the Reginald F. Lewis Museum and Maryland Historical Society. And so, which was focused on, it was an exhibition called At Freedom's Door, Challenging Slavery in Maryland, where we
God.
use historical objects and contemporary artworks to tell this larger story. And so then that's when I began to really dig and making all these connections to the history of Muslims in America
Mhm.
and just reading more and diving deeper into that history. But of course, growing up, I mean, I would go to conventions and conferences, which was the beautiful thing about being from this really unique communal experience is that I was always seeing folks of like heart and like mind uh, who also were exposed to some of the same ideas and concepts about community life and knowing it's like our community, our responsibility. And the teachers that I was around were always telling us, have to go to the best schools, get the best education, because you're going to have to build and create and establish new things that don't exist yet.
Right.
So I was always cognizant of that as well. But, I think just these different touch points growing up, I was observing and I was just taking kind of two sets of notes,
Hmm.
just thinking about, things that I could apply to for myself, but then also trying to put all these again puzzle pieces together, this larger play again, again, being a human being and trying to understand like what is my place here? What am I supposed to be doing? And what is this thing called being human? But stories and again, being around people and hearing all these different stories and just bearing witness to so many different lives that I was around. I was
Mhm.
always fascinated by that.
You
So,
said take the notes. That reminds me of that double consciousness that we tend to carry around,
mhm,
especially when it
mhm.
comes to
Yes,
storytelling.
absolutely. Brother M.K. Asante Jr., who was one of my professors. He's young. He's a son of Molefe Asante. He's a great African American historian, scholar, professor. MK was a friend. Him and his former wife Maya Freelon Asante. Um, we would in Baltimore. I would gather in their home. We would have conversations, and MK would talk about taking 2 sets of notes, which
Mm,
he talks a little bit about in one of his books. Um, it's bigger than hip hop, and yeah, but I, yes, I was always thinking about yes, all of these different things, these layers of my identity, and
mm,
also trying to understand, um, how to appreciate my identity, but also just how to live and be in the world and not think that I have to assimilate to
right,
what I was witnessing other people do.
right.
I definitely didn't want to do that. I wanted to try to forge my own path and understanding like what is my role, what am I supposed to be doing, and really thinking deeply about like how do I contribute to community, how do I contribute to the world, and
Mhm.
then that's when art came in, and that's when my creativity started to um, really bloom and blossom and expand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And that, takes me to the whole notion of what BMG Fly is.
Hmm.
It's it factor that we have that we utilize in our lives that to
Yeah.
me is it's a God-given like gift of
Hmm.
the essence of who you are. And that's what you bring to
Yeah.
everything. You bring it to your
Hmm.
storytelling, you bring it to the
Hmm.
work that you're doing with your whatever it is that you're involved in. And so
Hmm.
um talk about how that kind of comes through in the work that you're doing, like for example, leading up to the project you're doing right now with Clara's Fruit.
Yeah. I mean, it's really been a divine call. Morgan, the director of Clara's Fruit, Morgan Matthews, uh, who's my dear brother. It's like I Morgan and I have a really unique heart connection that I'm really grateful for. We started talking, and he was really helping me workshop another project, which shall I pray, God willing, that that comes to fruition, which takes place in Baltimore
Yeah.
City. But we were workshopping another project, and then I had encouraged him to apply for the Islamic Scholarship Fund, and so did someone else that he was working with at the
Hmm.
time. And so he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna apply," and we both applied, and he ended up getting it.
Hmm.
And and then just one thing led to the other. He started asking me some questions. I started sending him some information, and he's like, "Can you just come on to the team? Like, I think I need you." You know, um, and then one thing led to the other, and I kind of kept getting promoted to these different positions
Hmm.
based on the skill sets that I was bringing.
That's
And so now
right.
I'm the co-executive producer of the project.
Alhamdulillah.
Um, so yeah, my former mentor, Auntie Dr. Zakia Muhammad, wrote a book on Sister Clara Muhammad prior to her death, and we had extensive conversations. And actually, with the last time I had gone to see her in Orange County, where she was living at the time, she took me to see the film Hidden Figures.
Hmm.
And we had that experience together. And I never I mean, I really honestly never thought that I would be working on this film about Sister Claire Muhammad, who I also identify as a hidden figure, as someone who's made such significant contributions to the Muslim American community, particularly in Islamic education. Um, I couldn't have envisioned that happening. But again, it all feels like this divine plan that was brewing and taking place. And when Dr. Zakiya Muhammad, you know, she asked me to help her, I had helped her translate some Arabic to English that was a part of her book. Um, and so just knowing more about her life's work, and she also was a part of helping to establish and organize and um, really champion Islamic education in America. And that's what a lot of her scholarship was about. I just feel like it's just been a divine blessing to now be working on a project about Sister Claire Muhammad, her life legacy, and now her great grandson, who is the principal of Muhammad schools in Atlanta,
That awesome.
Georgia. It's pretty remarkable, you know. So it's just so exciting to see how all of these things are coming together. I've also recently connected with the granddaughter of Sister Claire Muhammad, Dr. Jalila Muhammad Dukes, who's from Chicago, and just beautiful sister. And it's like all these miraculous things have been happening to help me understand also, and to share this information with our crew and our team and with Morgan, just the power of the story and the value. And inshallah, praying that we'll be sharing this story around the world soon. So
Very soon, inshallah.
excited.
So
Yeah.
tell us what the title of that book is.
So Dr. Zakiya Muhammad's, it's Mother of the Nation. Um, and it's available on Amazon. Right now there's a few volumes that have been released. And I must say, and this is just not to stir up anything, but I really want to emphasize the importance when, as those coming from just the Muslim American community, when we tell our stories, making sure that we have certain procedures and processes in place. So if anything happens to us, our intellectual property is protected,
Yeah.
and there's some integrity around how it's shared. Because I know Dr. Zaki Muhammad, you know, just there was a lot of conversation, dialogue about her intellectual property. Now that she's no longer here, you know, having to go through certain steps to get her work published.
Right.
Again, I'll just say it was just a conversation that had to happen with a group of individuals, that I wasn't a part of that conversation, but I was aware that it was happening. And it broke my heart to an extent, because I know that there were some certain things I think she wanted that I don't think have happened. And so I just want to also just preface this by saying it's really important that we plan, you know, and are thoughtful, even if it's just something that's written and notarized, you know, that has, like, if you have intellectual property, if you have things that you want to share that you maybe not are able to share, to protect that, you know, to figure out what is the necessary means. And everyone has to go through. My son just walked in there.
Mashallah.
He's holding a balloon. Saying got a balloon. Nice. Mashallah. Okay, I'm on a video call right now, okay? I'm on a video call. Um, but yeah, just going back to doing what we can to protect it and have integrity around our intellectual property is very important. I know that's a whole nother conversation, but I really want to emphasize that.
That's so important.
Yeah, and I don't think it's talked about enough of like how do we do those things? Like, you know, how do we properly prepare? You or how do we share and let someone like other family member, close friend, community members know that we have stories, we have writings, we have, whatever it is that you have that you would like for the greater public to experience, making sure we have certain things in place so that that can be done and honoring, whatever legacy we're striving to leave behind.
It's
Um,
important. Legacy is what we
yeah,
have, what we leave behind, like you said.
yeah.
And being the
Um,
mother of the nation, that sounds like such an illustrious title. And I mean, some folks out there who may be watching this video may not know that Sister Clara Muhammad was the mother of
yes,
Barathine Muhammad, who we talked about earlier. So that's important.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
the importance of, your legacy. As we see, your son has made himself known. I love it. I adore it because children are listen, I could get emotional and watch about how important children,
Mhm,
being a mom myself. And
mhm,
the
mhm,
stories I tell with them as
uh-huh,
the first audience.
mhm,
So like,
mhm,
tell us a little bit more about
mhm,
your journey into this career with the first,
mhm,
as a mom. Like, how do they impact each other?
mhm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, prior to being a mother, I started this path of just exploring my creativity, um, and just navigating and figuring out, how do I show up? I know that I love photography was like really my first entryway into my creative practice, using Kodak disposable cameras as a kid, and the different digital cameras that started to pop up, and film cameras. Um, but now, I find myself very much doing this work because of our children, like knowing that I do want to leave something behind for them and for other generations to come. Our dear brother Amir Suleiman,
Mm.
always like has a whole album called, "You will be someone's ancestor, act accordingly." And knowing like that is such a strong reasoning. Like my why right now is because of them. And also Imam Zaid Shaker, who I worked with, uh, Imam Zaid would always say, you don't want to be a footnote in someone else's history book. Um,
So true.
and the importance of us telling our stories, uh, and not shying away from what we know as, you know, we know what our stories are. We know how some things have happened, specifically in American society, and not wanting that to be lost. So all of these different projects I've worked on, educational institutions, nonprofits, particularly within the Muslim community, has definitely been with this in mind. And then now that we have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old,
Mashallah.
um, I'm very much aware, like, oh, I definitely want to make sure they understand what this is and also know how to navigate this world that we live in. It's a very um, interconnected world now. It's things aren't as spread out as they used to be. We now know what's going on in all these different countries, and uh, you know, it's there's a connectivity that's there, and the thing that really brings us together are our stories.
Exactly.
And a lot tells us in the Quran about,
We're
this
made
idea of like,
to
yes, we're
my
created in nations and tribes to get to know one another.
and I
And
do
it's
believe
not about,
in storytelling.
yeah, and it's not about being all alike either. It's
Right.
not about us having to be the same or adopting the same cultural practices, or, but it's like we're all connected. We're one humanity. And these stories that we have really bring us together. And there's a thread there if we would only just like make time to slow down and stop, pay attention, like we can find this unique connectivity amongst us all that really
Definitely. And that's,
brings us all together.
you
Yeah.
said owning, well, as soon as you said, taking ownership, I don't think you used
Yeah.
these exact words, but those are the words
Okay.
that popped in my mind.
Yeah.
Owning your
Mm-hmm.
own narrative, that's
Mm-hmm.
literally what BMG Fly is all about. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that came about because of me wanting to
Mm-hmm.
create my own story. And I know there's so
Yeah.
many others like
Mm-hmm.
you and me who want to
Mm-hmm.
create our own stories, instead of stepping into a story that was laid out for us, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, doing things based on this expectation that we didn't
Mm-hmm.
even dream up. So like I
Yeah.
definitely want to touch on that because there's so many of us,
Mm-hmm.
women, young women, Muslim women,
Mm-hmm.
Black
Mm-hmm.
Muslim women who need to
Mm-hmm.
know that, that little girl who found that disposable Kodak camera has a story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Talk about her story and like owning that story before you even
Mm-hmm.
go into how you step into the role of being executive producer. Talk about that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I was a quiet kid. I didn't always feel like I belonged, I mean, I think this is a story of a lot of us.
Yep.
My mother was in education, she was an educator. My father was working in the California prisons, um, in the prison system as a Muslim chaplain. Um, and so he was using those Arabic skills that he gained in Sudan, to apply them to teach the Quran in the prisons. And so, you know, I remember visiting one of the prisons and I saw the artwork that the inmates had created. Those who were there had used so many different types of objects and just different materials that you would it was like unexpected materials to create lots of different types of art. And so, I could create some story in my mind about how all of this like led me to I was just bearing witness to things and seeing things and then applying things in my own life. So, I know that all these various moments that I've witnessed has had impacts on my ability to make connections, to be like a deep thinker, to process things. I watched a lot of 60 Minutes as a kid. So I was always like paying attention to what was going on politically and so, social things or just, again, I, I don't know why I'm the way that I am or why, I did certain things, but all of this exposed me to, and visiting, like, I went on a field trip to Ashland, Oregon, to the Shakespeare Festival in middle school.
That's
And
interesting.
that had a deep impact on me too, like seeing the theater. My mom took me to museums, theater, I was exposed to just so much. Um, and I was again making observations and then thinking, oh, okay, I guess I could do this. And then when I was at Morgan State, I started volunteering for the newspaper
Mm,
on campus.
yeah.
And someone was like, you can like major in photography, Aida. Like you're really good at it. You should, think about it. And I was like, really? I didn't even know that I could do that. I didn't
See?
even know there were photography classes. Like I was just so oblivious. I just was thinking I was going to be a doctor and I was going to help people and in the medical field. Like I was actually planning to go to Johns Hopkins and I had this whole plan in my mind of what I was going to do. And then that completely turned around when I realized that I could just make art or create. Um, and there was always this tug of war, because, you know, it's just like, how are you going to make money? You know, these
Right.
questions were asked of me, like, how are you going to sustain yourself? How are you going to get
Exactly.
health insurance? How are you
Exactly.
going to do this? So it always like kind of, but I was always interested in just making art, trying to make sense of this world. It was always a little bit complicated for me to understand why things were the way that they were. And then I guess as I started reading more and watching documentaries, I watched a lot of films my freshman year of undergraduate school. Before Netflix, there was Blockbuster,
Right. Exactly.
and I spent a lot of time there just like consuming a lot of information to help me put puzzle pieces together. And I think because of that, and reading magazines and like paying attention to different things that were published in magazines and newspapers. I read comic books, like
Mhm.
the Sunday newspaper, the comic section. I remember when Boondocks came out, and I was like,
It was so
not
cool.
the television show, but the comic
Exactly.
strip,
Yep.
in the Sunday paper. I used to
When
clip them
the
out
news-
and save them.
Right.
Yeah. So all of these things kind of, again, just I'm who I am because of all of this stuff, like I'm
Yeah.
sharing with you. I can't explain, you know, it's just all these things have led me to the next thing. I went to graduate school. I did formally study fine arts, and I have a master's in fine art, and I did a lot of art education work in museums and again doing curatorial projects and so then seeing in professional spaces where it's like, okay, there's actual storytelling taking place and
Right.
this is actually a thing, then it's like, okay, I can apply it. And then all of a sudden, when I got married and started graduate school, in the middle of graduate school, I was invited to go on Hajj. And I just prayed and I asked Allah, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to be of service, but use me, guide me, help me along on this journey. So I've had a very unconventional professional career, like pathway. Um, it's just been a prayer. I've been living on prayers, I think, just,
I want to talk
and
about that whole process,
yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
we are all guided by that light, that
Mm,
connection that we have to Allah. And
yeah.
what we talked about offline before today's
Mm-hmm.
conversation, I definitely want to dig deep into because everything that you've said, all of these experiences from your childhood and all of these
Mm-hmm.
observations that you have made, this richness of culture that you were blessed to be immersed in led you to
Yeah.
the decisions to
Mm-hmm.
go into this art-based career, and storytelling is the thread through it all. But
Mm-hmm.
throughout all of this, and i'm
Mm-hmm.
i'm relating to every single moment. I'm relating to every
Mm-hmm.
single moment, I'm telling you, because like
Mm-hmm.
you were saying, we have this heart connection, and I had
Mm-hmm.
a very similar experience. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely came to that crossroads where, like you were saying, how do I pay the
Mm-hmm.
bills? Like, how do I get health
Yeah.
insurance? i need I have to get married and have a life, and
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
something that a lot of young Muslim girls are
Mm-hmm.
at this point, where at this
Mhm,
crossroads where they're like,
mhm,
okay, I need to make decisions about my life, and I have this
mhm,
calling, and yet there are
mhm,
these outside expectations upon me that I need to make these
mhm,
decisions. And it's such a daunting period in our lives, this
mhm,
challenging moment that,
mhm,
takes you sometimes a plot twist, and it takes you down a marriage that necessarily was a situation, because I'm thinking
mhm,
about my own first marriage, and my whole purpose for getting married was, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm a good Muslim girl, gets married and makes and has a family, and um but however, that wasn't what was best for me, and I learned through those experiences. But it is very important for us to talk about that, because nobody pulled me aside and said, look, Nia, you can make your own decisions based upon these callings, this passion that you have, that Allah put in you. You don't necessarily have to get married and have babies, and like This is something I definitely want to dig into, but I know my time is running out, so I'm going to take a pause on my video, and inshallah we're going to restart and hop right back in here because I know this is something you wanted to talk about too. All right, let's do it. We're going to take a brief pause, take a break, and then we're going to come back in just a moment. All right. All right, Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. Alhamdulillah, where we left off, we were just about to talk about the importance of understanding yourself and knowing your own
Hmm.
identity, you know,
Hmm.
and how it's okay for you to like explore yourself and get to know yourself before you give yourself over to another relationship. So, uh,
Mm.
and I'm speaking from experience because as someone who has been married twice,
Hmm.
alhamdulillah, I learned uh several lessons twice. So,
Hmm.
um, I'm no longer married, which is, I think, a good thing. It's a blessing for me because I get to explore all of the things that I set aside for
Hmm.
others.
Hmm.
Growing up, I was always, as the eldest daughter, I was always the caretaker, and then
Hmm.
moving from eldest daughter into getting married at 18 and,
Hmm.
not really having an opportunity to understand what it is that I wanted from life. Um,
Hmm.
Talk about how that's such an important lesson or experience that you share and that you definitely want to share with others so that they can learn from that.
Hmm. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, about relationships, I mean, I think it is, excuse me, I think it is really important as you were talking about getting to know yourself and really knowing who you are, knowing kind of what your purpose is. And that's not always something that's revealed to everyone right away. I mean, I feel really blessed that I learned on an early age, like learned at an early age that I'm a creative, like
Yeah,
I'm someone who's creatively inclined, and I also really appreciate education and wanting to, as an educator, someone who teaches, um, you know, that was something that I felt was like a divine something placed within me, and I
exactly.
started to learn and discover that. Um, and I think also because I just made time to get to know myself a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but in between time, listening and hearing things, I do believe, like as Muslims, we're taught that Allah wants us to have companionship,
Mm.
and that looks different for so many different people. Um, for me, though, I saw, as I mentioned prior, when I would go to conventions and conferences, like I saw Black Muslim love. Like I saw that, and I was like, "Oh, I was attracted to that." I was like, "That looks like beautiful," and I saw that as a possibility for myself through seeing and bearing witness to other people's relationships and connections. Um, and so I was always excited about that, and I think I just put it in the back of my mind, like, "Oh, Allah would really want that one day, like, I would love for you to bless me with that," and asking Allah to bless me with companionship and love, particularly with someone who's coming from the same cultural background, and so when I did get married the first time and that didn't work out for me, um, similarly, there were lessons that I learned, and I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was there's nothing worthy of worship except Allah. Um, just period. It's like that was the lesson. Is like you don't worship another human being,
Correct.
um, and they shouldn't worship you. There shouldn't be this worshiping of each other, where
Mhm.
you really have to recognize like when you do find companionship and love, it's actually to bring you closer to the divine and this thing that we're all looking for, which is, I believe, love.
Mhm.
The depths of the love in which we're seeking is like only can come from the divine source. Like
Exactly.
I really believe that, and so you know, um, so figuring out that also at an early age, and recognizing that, once I was excited and ready again to seek out companionship, I didn't actually seek it out. Like, it just kind of came. I met my husband after Juma. We were introduced. Someone introduced us in San Francisco at the San Francisco Muslim Community Center. And then, we met, and there were things that aligned um, with our paths and our journeys. And it was like, okay, this makes sense for us to connect and build together,
Yes.
because we saw this as something complementary to what, like, the trajectory of our lives,
Right.
and what we were also seeking. My husband had seen his grandparents married over 50 years. Similarly, my grandparents, my paternal grandparents, had been married 80 years.
Right. Oh, mashallah.
So it's like, we saw this longevity of
Yeah.
Black love. Our grandparents were not Muslim, they're Christian, but we bared witness to that, and we both were longing for that. So when we came together, we knew, okay, giving up isn't an option.
Right.
We were navigating now. It's like, okay, holding up mirrors for each other so we could see each other. So it's like, oh, I got work to do on myself. Oh, you got work to do on yourself. Like, let's work together to
Right.
heal, because that was one thing, we both were traumatized from prior relationships.
Mhm.
So healing from those collectively together, and figuring out how we do that as individuals, but then also together. And then supporting each other on our purposes. My husband's an amazing writer and also educator, and like, we both try and support each other, and having someone who believes in me and my vision, but also we're like, but we also want kids.
Uh,
So things ebb and flow. Like, there's seasons where it's like there's a lot of planting seeds, and then watering, and there's there's a garden that we're creating together. So we're tending to that garden, we're nurturing it, and things are starting to blossom, and things are starting to, to I wouldn't say bear fruit just completely yet, but like, we see the blossoming and the blooming starting to happen from seeds we planted 12 years ago when we first got
oh,
married.
mashallah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so important, the
Yeah.
mirror that you hold up for each other. It's a
Mhm, mhm,
and the honoring of both of your identities and how you both
mhm,
together to uplift one another. It's not one or the other, it's a combination of both. And like you said, you really have to know yourself and sometimes look at yourself and see
mhm.
those things that you can grow in certain areas. I definitely need to heal from this, or
Mhm.
this is something I never knew about myself that you are helping me to see and learn. But the
Yeah.
whole idea is you're allowed to honor your identity. You're allowed to honor who you are.
Mhm.
And like you said, that lesson from the first relationship was you don't worship another person. You're not doing
Right.
this for this other
Yeah.
person. And
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like, as a young Muslim woman, I was expected to make certain personal sacrifices for
Mm. Mhm.
other people when in
Mhm.
fact, you know, that's not necessarily the case of what would be the best thing. Like
Yeah.
from the example of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we are partners together, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is so very important for young girls, young Muslim girls to understand that it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
okay for you to be focused on who you are and developing who you are.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
when you are seeking out companionship, you come together.
Mhm.
You don't have to give up
Yeah.
who you are.
Absolutely. And I mean, this goes into, this idea, like, we all have our own fingerprint, our own unique print. Everyone has been placed with some divine gifts, some divine talents. I just happen to have, and this is not purposeful, because I have this little box that like, my phone is sitting on, so we
Uh,
can have this conversation. But I have this quote by Chadwick Boseman. I actually want to read this
oh
because
yeah.
it's just really profound about purpose. Um, I wrote this down. I saw a video online and I wrote it down because I was like, this is so profound. But he said, I feel like I'm living in my purpose. The funny thing about purpose is that it unfolds more and more to you every day. You could be living in what was revealed to you at a particular time, and then you might get um, stagnated because there's more that you're supposed to do. It doesn't just stop as you do one thing. So I think it's just being open to what you're supposed to do at this moment, not getting stuck in the past, because purpose is not related to career. Purpose is not related to a job. It's related to what God put inside of you that you're supposed to give to the world. And you can do that in various positions and forms. So I think it's staying open to what that essence is at all times.
Yeah.
Um, so, going back to like companionship and relationships, when you are navigating that, to any young Muslim listening to this, or anybody, any human being listening to this, like we talked about choices, there were choices that I could have made that went taking me down a different trajectory and path. But I, as someone who like was like, I'm Muslim, I was striving to please Allah first and foremost.
Right.
And so that had an impact on the decisions that I was making.
Ex
Um, and submitting is hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And I want to emphasize this. Submitting to God and what Allah has asked of all of humanity to do, because it's not just Muslims, everyone has access to this information. It's like, if you make a choice to say, okay, I'm going to submit and do what God wants me to do versus just following what I
Right.
think is best for my life. I actually tried to do that and it didn't work out well for me. So for me, it's like, no, I think I'm going to follow what God is asking of me to do. And and so doing that was difficult and not easy,
Mhm.
but I trusted and I continue to trust that and be open to what is in front of me,
Mhm.
these different points. So that's why I was saying earlier, my professional life and my career, isn't this conventional one. It's like things ebb and flow. Sometimes I'm teaching and sometimes I'm on set working on a film project, or
Mhm.
sometimes I'm in a museum, working with curators, on a project. Or I'm executive producer of a film, it's just all these different things. I've just been very open to the possibilities of how Allah is using me at different points in time.
Exactly.
And now, approaching almost 40 years old, inshallah, next year. Um, yeah, I recognize what Chadwick Boseman said about being just open to what is in front of you at all times, being present to what God has put within you to do at particular points, and trying to navigate and seeing how there is a connection. There
Mhm.
can be one, depending on how you're, you know, how you're being used at different times. But
Yep.
because creativity, specifically creativity, is just, it's so broad. I mean, there's like moments I have to be creative with the way that I'm parenting,
Right.
um, you know, nurturing my relationships with not just my husband, but my mother, my father, my siblings. Um, so all these different things are, for me, it's all connected. And I try to stay mindful of that. Like, oh, if I'm not working on something that's connected to like my film career or something, then I'm just like, okay, well, like I'm doing this other thing, but I'm still threading and still holding on to those dreams or those aspirations, and just having to be patient, because it's like,
Abs
okay, this time will come for this seed to
Yeah.
bloom and blossom, but things don't just bloom right away. You have to plant those seeds and nurture them and water them and provide a little sunshine. And sometimes there's rain, there's a storm, there's floods, and you
Exactly.
just have to like, yeah, go with the flow of life.
Yeah,
Um,
several and listening to what Allah wants you to do. There's so many
mhm.
races, like, I need to do this by this age, and I'm expected
Yeah,
to
yeah.
accomplish X by this time, but essentially you're not on this timeline that you've created.
Mm-mm.
Allah created this,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have
Mm-hmm.
to be patient. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's a plot twist, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have to be okay with that. You have to submit
Mm-hmm.
because Allah knows what's best for you. And that
Yeah.
guidance, as somebody who prays Salat Istikhara almost every day,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
you have to
Mm-hmm.
tap into that because
Yes.
you can take, like you said, different choices will take you somewhere that
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily need to be going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, even when we do think like, oh, I made a mistake or oh, I did this, like, no, no, that was all part of the divine plan
Yep,
for your life. And we do have to glean upon and reflect upon what did that mean or what can I learn from all of this is all there's always things, signs pointing us in the direction to teach us about ourselves and about the creation, Allah's creation, for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that thread of storytelling always comes through
Mhm.
for me because I know that, going to be held accountable for my life.
Mm.
Book will be handed to
Mhm.
me. Excuse me.
Mhm.
So those things, those choices, the way that I wrote
Mhm.
how I wanted my life
Mhm.
to go, the proof
Mhm.
will be in the book. And so
Mhm.
making those choices,
Oh.
you know what the ultimate goal is. But like
Mhm.
you said, it is a journey that you have to learn from. There's no one way to do things. And
True.
that's
True.
something I had to come, like that was an experience of when I first got to LA. I had to realize that
Mhm. Mhm.
there's no one way that things are done. Like I was looking for
Mm.
the formula, the process,
Mhm.
by step.
Mhm.
So what do I have to do? Because I'm a workaholic.
Mhm.
I'm willing to put in
Mhm.
the work to get the results.
Mm.
But I had to
Mhm.
learn that it doesn't work like that. There's no
Mhm.
rhyme or reason sometimes to how things
Mhm.
get made in quote
Mhm.
unquote Hollywood. But the one thing
Yeah.
that was constant goes back to what
Mhm.
you were saying, making decisions based on Allah and making decisions
Mhm.
um, with the hope that you're doing what's pleasing to Allah is so
Mhm.
counterintuitive in
Mhm.
Hollywood. So
Mhm.
all of the obstacles that I came up against were because the paradigm wasn't aligned. The way
Mhm.
things are done with regard to the film and TV industry in LA was,
Mhm.
we're gonna do what makes us the most money. We're gonna
Mhm.
capitalize on, those things were their North Star. And
Mhm.
I learned soon, quickly, that that wasn't how I wanted to operate. And so that's what took me into the independent film space. And
Mhm.
alhamdulillah, Allah has been like derailing some of my little choices that I've been making. Oh, I want to do this so that I can, no, no, you need to be over here because, you need to establish, like you said earlier, things that don't exist yet. So
Mm. Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
something that we as Muslims in America, especially Black women, I'm going to say,
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
are doing. We're creating things
Mhm.
that don't exist. And
Mhm.
you talked about Sister Clara Muhammad and what she did
Mhm.
with Islamic education in America.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about, like, how we can take that essence, that's what
Mm.
we call Black Muslim Girl Fly, and like
Mhm.
elevate that and spread that to all the other Muslim girls all over, to say, listen, you
Mhm.
need to harness your BMG fly and make things happen and create things that don't exist yet. So,
Mhm.
like, how do you see us taking that? Like, what would you like to see
Mhm.
more from BMG Fly?
Hmm. I just think it's important to, as we've been talking about, just understanding, getting to know yourself, um, spending that quiet time, reflecting, praying, uh, just as individuals. Like I think we all need to make time to do that, to understand like how do I show up as my full best self striving to do everything that I can with excellence, um, just understanding, understanding oneself as a young person. That took me time, to understand that, and that again, it doesn't happen overnight. Um, but by being in community and seeing and bearing witness to others, that's important too. So I would say, to women, young women, brothers too, to just make time to understand self. I think that there's wisdom in understanding also the prophetic stories that we have, particularly even the story of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Um, and this connection to like the understanding oneself, like understanding the prophetic biography, like when he was a young person, he had all of his family members, were dying. Like he didn't grow up just with his mother and father. Like he was raised by so many different people um in his life, and then tended to animals. Like, so the type of heart that he had, and I used to teach this to children in Baltimore, actually, at the Muslim Community Center, when we had like a little Sunday school there, teaching the children about the type of character of a person that, you know, to have such a soft heart, to be connected to the feelings and sensitivities of people around him. There were things that he had to do or experience and go through, and tending to animals was one of those things, and being around older people,
Yes,
people who were his family members, but they were older, and folks who had lived a little bit longer and who had experienced life. Like,
right.
all of these people helped cultivate him to become the man that he became.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to take that to heart. So it's like this thing called being human. It's not, can't really do it in isolation. Like, you need to have other people around you to understand who you are as well. So I would say folks to like get offline and get into community, get involved, volunteer, spend time with yourself, get to know yourself, take walks, take the bus, like people watch, observe things. I remember hearing Barry Jenkins, who's a well-known filmmaker. He talked about taking the train from one like cross country just to people watch and to study human behavior. Um, and I think that there's something so rich about those acts. I just remember taking the bus. I didn't have a car. I didn't have the money to have a car. So I walked a lot around Baltimore City, taking the bus, taking, just public transportation. And it did help me to observe human behavior and observe people, and, just learning a lot about myself through watching and witnessing others. And
Exactly.
then also being in community helped with that too. So yes, I would just say we just really need to be in community with one another. We really need to spend time with each other to like really get to know ourselves outside of just being on the internet. I know it's hard because there's just so much accessible to us. And you can learn and study human behavior through, Instagram or these platforms or whatever. But I think heart to heart conversations, face to face dialogue, there's just nothing like it,
Right.
So yeah, I just think that at this time in our lives and all of this happening in the world, like, yeah, just getting outside, talking to people, getting involved, figuring out how to, live out our goals, dreams, aspirations. Like, I think we just have to do that in community with others. I really believe that.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'm sorry, I think that was a really long answer, but
No, it was so perfect. And other sisters that I've talked with in our Friday features have expressed similar ideas. And inshallah, one of the goals we have is to have more in-person events, which is a little,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
our biggest goal for this year for an in-person event is our annual film festival. So
Okay.
inshallah, if all goes according to plan and we raise enough funds and we're
Mhm,
able to like you said, build enough community to get it up off the ground again. That's one of our
Hmm.
big goals this year, inshallah. Yeah,
Sure.
looking forward to it.
Nice.
Hopefully, we'll
Awesome.
be able to, if possible, see Clara's fruit by then. Our
Mm,
festival usually happens in December, so
okay. Okay. There's a strong possibility that can happen. We'll definitely be talking about that and staying in
inshallah.
touch. Yeah.
Inshallah. Wonderful, wonderful. Alhamdulillah. So I'm so grateful. Alhamdulillah. You know, I could talk with you off camera for a long time.
Yeah.
Like we we have so much we can vibe about, including Baltimore,
Excuse me.
you know, mommyhood, storytelling. So
Yeah.
uh, but inshallah, I would love for us to get together in person. When are you going to be in the States, you know?
Yeah, I'm traveling to different places. I'll be in California in July, I believe. Inshallah. Yeah.
Inshallah, maybe we can make something
Um,
happen.
yes, I would love that.
That would be wonderful. I know that you had ordered our BMG Flag guided journal. I can't
Hmm.
not ask, have you gotten it yet?
Yes, it did arrive. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for creating that and just being intentional about having something that's tangible that is um just that can be used to document, and that's something that I've been journaling is like a big thing for me, but also something that I'm striving to pass down to our children, that they can look back and look at things that I'm reflecting and writing and have that for themselves, like leaving little breadcrumbs for them. So when they get older, they know, especially our daughter, knowing how to navigate this world. So thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for your time. And if there's anything at all that I can personally do or BMG Flag can do, let us know. And yeah, we'll be there.
Thank you, Nia. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I pray Allah continues to bless you and all those others around you working and doing this amazing work.
Alhamdulillah. All right, well, inshallah, I'll see you. This is my dua to see you in July in person.
Okay, let's make intentions. May Allah make it so.
Yes, I mean. All right, enjoy the rest of the Ramadan. We're entering the
Thank
last
you.
nights, and
Yes,
I'll remember you in my duas. And oh, thank
thank you.
you for the prayers that you took with you on your trip when you made Umrah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
All right, take care, sister. I love you.
Right.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Love you too. Assalamu alaikum salam.